Okay, it says that we are live. Hello, everybody. Whether you're watching this later or if you manage to roll in here as we become live, my name is Martin Cahill. I'm the publicity guy and marketing guy with Erewhon Books. And thank you for showing up, for watching this reading tonight, for being a part of it, whether that's live or if you come by later. Thanks for taking some time. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all safe. And we should have our reading beginning around 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And our readers and host should be here shortly. I guess I'm also a host, but I'm sort of a host tech guy. But looks like Arkady and Viv are here. One moment. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi there.
Can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Hang on. I can't hear you at all. So give me a second. Aha.
That would be why.
Say something?
Say something.
Okay, good. We can hear you now.
Wonderful. How you doing? Good evening.
Pretty good. Sorry,
We're running a little late, but
Yeah.
we're here.
No problem at all. This is sort of like the waiting room area as folks sort of filter in and
Yeah.
whatnot. So feel free to take your time, get a drink, get a snack, whatever you
Now
need.
we're done.
Well, look at that. Lovely. We have 7 people so far. Liz says, yay, friends in the chat. Hi, Liz. Yeah, so folks who are just joining us, thank you so much for taking some time tonight to be with us. We're waiting on our host, Sarah Guan, who should be here shortly. And then we'll start around 7-ish. Arkady and Vivian are, do you prefer Vivian or Viv? What's your favorite?
Either one is fine. I generally go by Viv with my friends, so go with that.
Oh, thank you, Viv. Cool. That sounds good. I'm assuming that means we're friends. But that's true.
Okay, works.
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Yeah, so they'll both be reading starting around 7 from a project they've been working on together, which is awesome. Can't wait to hear more and hear from it. And then for folks who are joining us watching this, we're probably going to do a little Q&A sometime around like 7:30, 7:35 when the reading wraps up. So feel free. You can always throw some questions in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on those. And we can do that until we get to the hour at 8 o'clock. Pardon me if I look away. I'm going to go on the Erewhon Twitter and start shouting, it's happening, it's happening.
It works. Yeah, it works. It's just really, really soft.
Yeah. Just trying to figure out if I can fix that.
We can't.
Might just be him.
Yeah.
Anything I need to do on my end? And hearing issues or audio visual?
You're really soft.
Yeah, we can barely hear you with our audio turned all the way up.
Oh, that's weird. I'll see what I can do on my end for that. I don't think there's much I can do, so I'll just put on my theater voice and project a little bit.
That'll work.
Perfect. How's your day been, the both of you?
Interesting.
Yeah. I've been at work
Good.
literally until about
20 minutes ago?
20 minutes ago, 30 at most. And that's just because I ducked out of a meeting early. So
Oh, grand. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
we're 2 hours ahead of you. So
It's just gone 4:50 here.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Okay. Well, thank you for cutting and running a little early from day job stuff. Appreciate it.
happens.
Wonderful. Let me shout to the heavens. 10 minutes until. Sorry for the incessant tagging of both of you on Twitter. The social media machine.
We are on camera.
I know, but
Okay.
I don't care. Me either.
Okay. Anthony says greetings from Scotland.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Liz says we can both be heard around the same volume, which is good.
Well, good. It's just our problem then, which is the least important of them, I guess. We
Well,
can't
luckily
hear
you'll
you.
be.
You're just
yeah.
very soft.
I think it's the first time in my life I've ever been described as very soft and hard to hear. So I appreciate that. Let's see.
Why is iTunes back on? Turn it off. It should not be on. It's going to take a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Can't see it.
Might be an artifact. Or not.
Yeah, see, it's heating up the computer. Like, now it's off. Okay. You may need to get something to balance the computer on to get airflow underneath of it. So it's like running the fan.
Greetings from Scotland, greetings from Iowa, greetings from London. We've got North Carolina, Oakland, California. Wonderful. This is great. And if you're just tuning in, Arkady and Viv will be beginning their reading around 7-ish or so. We're going to do a little Q&A later on, so if you have any questions for either of these wonderful authors, please throw it in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on those, and we'll get started in scant 7 to 10 minutes. We're still waiting on one of our other hosts to say hello. Hi, AJ. I like your name of Disco Biscuit, but I read as D1 Isco B1 Iskit. I don't know. That's a bad joke, and I'm sorry about it. But not so sorry that I wouldn't do it again. Okay. All right, we got about 19 people so far. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm sporting my new print bookstore shirt that I just got from Portland, Maine. Print books keep us together even when we're apart. Which
I love that.
Yeah, my buddy Josh Christie runs that store with a partner of his, and I love it. And I saw that and I was like, I gotta get it. It's a great message, and it supports all the booksellers and all the folks up there that currently are having a little bit of trouble at the store. So, and I was like, hey, it's a baseball tee, and I don't play baseball, so this is great. Let me pretend that athleticism a bit more.
I'm really worried about this.
I don't know what we should do about it.
I don't think we can do anything.
Would you like me to take you to upstream if you have a thing you're dealing with?
We're trying to figure out why my computer's overheating.
Ah, okay. No worries. I can always take you off the stream for a minute if you need to.
Yeah, can you for a second?
Yeah, no problem. So we'll see you in a moment.
Why it's...
And now it's just me. Hi, Joe. Joe says, greetings from Chicago. And that's a good point, Liz. I'll ask them when they come back. We'll get some indie bookstore love going. And anybody in the chat, if you've got a local bookstore or bookshop link to one of your favorite indies, at Erewhon, we're all about supporting our independent bookstores. So feel free to drop your favorite in the link. Last video, I wore a Books Are Magic t-shirt, as that's one of my local shops here in the city. Also, shout out to Astoria Bookshop, which is my directly local neighborhood bookstore, which I love. So, hey, Jackie, howdy from Queens. Also from Queens here, Astoria, what up? Hey, Angela, hello from Brooklyn. Back to you. Lindsay, hello from DC. Hello, hello. Oh, and it looks like Arkady and Viv are coming back. All right. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We're back. So actually, before we begin, Liz was asking, you two can see the chat as well, right?
We can.
Perfect. So Liz was wondering if either of you had any favorite bookstores, either local or abroad, that you'd like to give a little shout out to.
Yeah.
Collected Works.
Yeah, Collected Works here in Santa Fe, which is where we live now. And I think they do have a bookshop link. And I always have to give a shout out to the English bookshop in Uppsala, which was my local bookshop when I lived in Sweden, and are just super fabulous people.
They were great.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll make collected works, and Liz says she'll grab those bookshop links and throw them on in. It's wonderful. Yay.
Yay, books.
Are either of you, I know that I've had a lot of trouble reading in general these days, just with everything going on. How's that been for the both of you? Is reading somehow easier? Is it somehow much harder? Sort of the same?
It depends on the book, I guess.
Depends, yeah. You're better at it than me.
I personally have been having trouble reading new things, but reading is not a problem. I reread all of Stephen King's The Outsider like yesterday because I wanted to.
He just got his newest book, and oh my god, I just ate it up in less than a day. Just zoom all the way through.
But that's you always. You're much faster
I read
than
fast.
me.
Is it a new novel by him, or just like a collection of
It's a collection, but it's got a long novella that is kind of a sequel to The Outsider. So if you were like Holly Gibney, it's a Holly Gibney story.
Cool. That's awesome. It's been tough for me to read too. It took me weeks to finish The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, which was great. It just, my brain was not ready for it because anxiety kept shoving its way in there and making me focus on the world. But I've read that. I've read Robert Jackson Bennett's newest one. I did a review of that. And I just finished Sarah Gailey's The Echo Wife, which was just...
I'm jealous that you have access to that already.
It was a very nice get from shout out to Renata Sweeney at Tor. Thank you. But oh my god, I read The Echo Wife in like I think 4 or 5 days, and it was enough to just karate chop the anxiety out of my head because I was so worried about the book. But it was brilliant. I got to the end and I was like, oh, I just saw the trick that they did, and I was like, Sarah. But it was very good. I think
Gailey is. Every book that they write gets more and more accomplished, and that's been. We share an agent, so sometimes I get to see new things. But this one, I've only read the opening chapter one time, so that's it.
Oh, it's brilliant. So I was like, this is the book that's hopefully
Angel of the Crows.
God, I love that. It was amazing.
Oh, we got the Ivy in Baltimore. Hey, Karen. Hannah's here. Hey, Hannah.
Hey, Karen.
We got Seth. We got Steve. Steve has no camera. That's okay. We still like you. Okay. So I'm going to give a quick text to Sarah. We should be here any moment.
I will.
And we have 36 people with us. This is great. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Thank you guys for coming. Me too, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, like that wasn't at like a festival where people kind of were just shuffling between thing and thing. And it didn't really feel like it had anything to do with me.
A record number for us.
Well, I appreciate everyone joining in. For those of you who are just joining us, Arkady and Viv are going to be reading from a new thing they've been working on together, which is very, very exciting. I read a little snippet in the newsletter from you, I believe it was earlier today, Arkady, that I was like, oh, this is what they're reading tonight, and I was quite excited. So we're going to do a reading, and then around 7:30 or so, transition over to a bit of Q&A for these wonderful authors. So if anyone has any questions, any thoughts, anything they'd like to ask them, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm keeping my eyes on it, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you again for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, I think it's probably just going to go in waves. I don't know if fans are actually mean it's melting down.
I know. Give me that.
Or you.
I'm not sure if anybody can hear. We just hit 7 o'clock here in New York City, and there's a lot of noise outside for healthcare heroes. So if you work in healthcare, thank you. We're very, very appreciative and hope you're all staying safe and well.
I give back. It's only fair.
Is
Or
it
at least
the
red wine sometimes.
the passing of the wine, the passing of the conch shell? Is that how you'll transition between who's reading? No. Oh, looks like, hello, Nancy from Queens. And it looks like we have Sarah's coming on in. There she is.
Hi,
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
So,
How are you?
Doing well. How is everyone else?
Hanging in there.
Doing
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, we're good.
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Let me know when we're starting.
Yeah, I figure maybe we'll give it till 7:05 just to make sure
Okay.
everyone who wants to join the live stream can do so. We're currently at 46 people, so
That's awesome.
Wow.
thank you times 46. No, 44. It's going to change up and down, but you know what? Somewhere 40 plus. But yeah. And Sarah, if you want to give a brief introduction as to who you are for anybody who's joining us.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Sarah Guan. I'm an editor at Erewhon Books, and I actually used to work with Vivian when we were both Orbiteers.
That was a lot of fun.
It was great. Oh man, those books.
Good memories.
Yep. And if you guys haven't checked out Strange Practice by Vivian Shaw, you should. That's a great series.
Yes, you
Little
should.
fun.
Yes, you should. You should read all of them, all three.
Yeah, and please feel free to any books that you guys have out. Please feel free to shout out at any time. We'll throw up our bookshop.
We'll manage the self-promotion somehow.
Yeah, I figured you would, but
You're better at it than me.
I have more practice.
That is true.
we
You're
got
also
Lou-
going to get the double act, so yeah.
I wouldn't have it any other way. Let's see. We got Lewis from Brooklyn. We got Jay from Omaha. Raina
We
from
have a lot
Chicago.
of geographic diversity.
We got someone from Scotland in here, which is great.
Yeah.
We got Alyssa from Hawaii. Hello, hello. And
Damn,
for those
Hawaii.
yeah.
We have New Zealand in here.
Oh yeah. And for those of you who are joining here for this live stream, thank you for being here. Thank you, Arkady and Viv, for being here. We were supposed to have you guys physically at the office in April, so it's really, really great to have you here online with us. So thank you again.
Yeah, it's wonderful to get to do this. We were sad that the pandemic. Well, we're sad in general that the pandemic happened, but also for this reason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm really glad we can make it happen.
Oh, in the comments, Liz says, Arkady and Viv, would you like to tell us a favorite bookstore near you? And I can pull up a bookshop link.
Yes, we have done that. And it was Collected Works in Santa Fe, right?
Yep.
As well as a lovely shout out to a bookstore in Sweden.
I don't know if the English bookshop in Uppsala has a bookshop link. They might. They're pretty hooked into the scene. So
Okay. I just wanted to get Sweden right. I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to get this wrong. I don't know if I get it right or right. I don't know. Either way, I'll hope for the best. But yeah, if anyone's joining in, we're going to start in about a minute. And if you have any questions for Arkady or Vivian, we're going to do a little Q&A sometime after the reading in about a half hour or so. So feel free, drop any questions that you'd like in the chat box. And it's 7:05. I think I'm going to take myself away. I'll still be nearby if anything arises. Sarah, if you'd like to introduce Arkady and Viv, and then I'll remove you from the stream and you two can take it away.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So, yeah. Here's our lovely double act. We have Arkady Martine, who is a speculative fiction writer, and as Dr. Anna Linden Weller, a historian of the Byzantine Empire and a city planner. She is currently a policy advisor for the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, where she works on climate change mitigation, energy grid modernization, and resiliency planning. Under both her names, she writes about border politics, rhetoric, propaganda, and the edges of the world. Arkady grew up in New York City, and after some time in Turkey, Canada, Sweden, and Baltimore, lives in Santa Fe with her wife, the author Vivian Shaw, who is also here. Find her online at arkadymartine.net or on Twitter as @ArkadyMartine. Vivian Shaw wears way too many earrings and likes edged weapons and expensive ink. She was born in Kenya and spent her early childhood in the UK, moving to America in the mid-80s. She has a BA in art history, an MFA in creative writing and publishing arts, and has worked in academic publishing and development, and is looking forward to expanding her freelance editing portfolio. She writes about monsters, machines, disasters, and found family. Her short sci-fi/horror fiction has appeared in Uncanny and Pseudopod, and she is the author of the Dr. Greta Helsing trilogy, Strange Practice, Dreadful Company, and Grave Importance. In her spare time, she collects vintage cookbooks and fountain pens and writes fanfiction under the pen name Coldhope. You can find her on Twitter as @CeruleanCynic. She lives in Santa Fe with her wife, the author Arkady Martine. Take it away.
All right, so because it's both of us, we thought we would do something that is not only unpublished, but unsold and unfinished, because it's the book we're working on together. I've been describing it as a science fantasy political romance. Is that about valid?
Yeah. Plus geology.
There's a lot of geology. And it's a project that we're really excited about. We've been working on it off and on for about a year. We've really sort of kicked into gear on it recently. So we wanted to read the beginning of it to you all. Some of you who might have heard a version of the very opening a long time ago, but we like to think that we've gotten somewhere from there at this point. It's called Valoros.
Working title.
We'll trade off reading. So here we go. Prelude. From the nearest station, it took 2 standard weeks of travel to reach the Valoros system. 4 individual jumps and full sublight acceleration between jump points. The Admiral Priam, with her older and less powerful star drive installation, took longer to make the trip than one of the Imperium's new warships, but nobody on board was in any kind of hurry. Even if Valoros wasn't out at the back of Beyond, near the end of one spiral arm, this duty would have been low on the list of preferred assignments. The Imperium's central planets were about as technologically sophisticated as it was possible to be, and offered a variety of gravitational fields to suit the physiological needs of Imperial citizenry, from the full freefall mutant to the fully groundbound. But nowhere in the capital world did the general background grav exceed 1G, or 1.5 at most. Valoros, well, the nicer parts of Valoros Alpha, hovered around 2. And out in the hinterlands, the spot gravity could jump up to 5 in the really rich mineral claims. This was bad enough when one was a full-blood grounder, but for anyone with a respectable fraction of FM in their genes, it was unpleasant. Captain Audax Callicrides Cray stood in the Priam's Deck 30 forward observation lounge watching the clouds swirled an inimical planet, which he had volunteered to inhabit for the next 10-year hitch of field assignment. Valoros Alpha was grim even from a couple 100,000 miles out, a gray-brown ball of rock half obscured by bands of cloud, the occasional sea glinting like a tooth as the planet turned. He had studied maps of this world for half a year now, as a geologist and mining engineer for the Imperium, and as he watched the continents grow larger and larger, the corrugated face of the planet slowly expanding to fill the Priam's viewports, he could see the gravimetric schematics just as clearly with his mind's eye. Valoros was important for one and only one reason: its rich deposits of the mineral desmerite, from which desmerium was extracted and refined for use in the star drive. Desmerium was a nondescript dark gray metal with one very peculiar characteristic. It generated an intense, localized gravitational field. Bring together enough of it in a sufficiently pure form, under the correct conditions, and you could, with some precision, fold the fabric of space-time around it, creating a situation in which it was possible to connect 2 vastly distant points long enough for a ship to pass from one to the other, circumventing hundreds of light years of distance. Cray could do the calculations in his head for unit weight of pure desmerium to gravitational strength in Gs, and he knew very well that exposure even to the general background level on the surface of Valoros was going to be uncomfortable. Exposure to the desmerite deposit themselves would be painful, and considerably so. Do you want to live for 3 decades, or just 1 more? The fleet doctor had demanded when Cray told her where his next assignment would be. I'll write you an exemption. Nobody with as much FM in their genes as you ought to be within light years of Valoros. I can't think why you were assigned there in the first place. I volunteered, Cray said. It was my choice. The doctor had stared at him and opened and shut her mouth once or twice, nothing coming out. When she spoke again, it was simply to offer him the standard prescriptions that freefall mutants needed to bear the effects of mild to moderate gravity. Vitamin and mineral supplements, painkillers, mild stimulants. Cray had accepted them all with polite thanks and left. He was used to that expression on people's faces, or at least a variation thereof. It was tiring. Everything was tiring. Everything was already tiring, and he had not even yet set foot on the planet. It was complicated, the chain of decisions which had led him to this point. Complicated and unpleasant. He had deliberately chosen Valrosan duty because of the intense gravity, because he was so physiologically ill-suited to the place. His mother, Tamar, had been a full-blood freefall mutant, and Cray himself demonstrated something like 60% FM expression. Like most part FMs, he was entirely at home in microgravity and could bear low grav without too much discomfort, but anything above 1G was exhausting. It was partly defiance, his presence here, and it was partly a kind of applied fatalism, not as directed and intent as any form of suicidal ideation, more an active lack of self-preservation. You can't do this, he'd been told, not simply regarding this assignment, but over and over again throughout his life, starting with his father. You can't do this thing, and you should not try. You will damage yourself. You are useless and incapable. Fuck you, Cray's instinctive reaction had always gone. Watch me. He had survived the academy on that determination, a narrow-boned and worryingly intense cadet, with no love lost between him and his fellow students, and graduated near the top of his class despite spending quite a lot of time in the infirmary. It turned out that he did have something to offer the Imperium after all. The thing it turned out that Cray was best at, the thing he was for, was geology. And geology was currently key to the Imperium's expansion. Geology, after all, was what had given the Imperium Desmorite. Even a part FM, fragile-boned creature like Audax Cray was of value if that creature could help extract the raw material for star drives from the dust and misery of a Desmorite mine. He'd been heading toward Valeros for as long as he could remember. He had not needed to answer the doctor's question, but if he had done so, it would have been with a question of his own. Why would I want to live that long? He would have meant it, too. He had never understood people's desire to hang on to existence for its own sake. He would do the job he was for to the best of his ability for as long as he could, and that would be enough. Hours before the Priam would begin to decelerate into her parking orbit, Cray could feel Valeros already pulling him, could feel the planet settling its invisible hooks into bone and blood and muscle, drawing them tight, taking up the load, piling weight upon weight against his physical structure. This world will eat me before too long, he thought, hands flat against the cold crysteel of the viewports. Beyond his spread fingers, the clouds of Valeros gleamed dully. It will eat me. I wonder if I will mind.
Morning in the valley. This is how it has always been. The new day tips itself over the edge of the mountains, tentative at first, and flooding down little by little as the sun rises, spilling into each ravine, evaporating shadow. The light paints the mountainside, illuminating every scrub brush and rock outcrop, first deep copper and then rose gold as its angle shifts, newborn and perfect, until all at once the whole side of the valley flares blinding, brilliant gold, too bright to look at for very long. It doesn't last. Barely a minute passes before the fire vanishes once more, and the pale lemon light of early morning fills up the valley like some jewel-clear liquid, waking men and creatures to the day. Deep in the heart of the mountain that marks the valley's head, the last of the flare light of dawn vanishes, and veins of crystal shift and chime slightly as they cool. Sheer planes, facets, faces, crystallographic structure, color centers, all of it fades back to black. Distantly, the chime reverberates throughout the matrix surrounding the crystal until it, too, fades to nothing at all. The crystal outcrops across this landscape share one very specific characteristic. Every exposed facet, every tiny shaft, terminates in the same angle, a vast variegated surface covered with tiny, identical prisms. Twice a day, when the sun is rising or setting, its rays strike the hillside at the precise angle to set every single crystal face alight at once. A sudden flood of brightness and a faint, sweet chiming sound as the rock tries to expand. In the high places on the mountain, and the slope-clinging villages and the citadel city cut into the mountainside, that sound carries in the empty air. The crystal is only visible at dawn and dusk, but perhaps it watches all the time. From time to time, it has watched useless missions sent out to it from the newest city down on the plains, missions bent on settling and claiming the mineral riches buried underneath the valley. They come in ground crawlers, tiny with distance and unimportance, and they will set up another encampment exactly as they have set up their previous attempts. And exactly as before, they will be washed away by the tide of the spring thaw down the mountain, or by the sheer unyielding force of the landscape itself in summer drought, or perhaps simply by the current keeper of the mountain's ancient citadel, the place sometimes called the Frowning City, or else in a more Valorosan tongue, Salon, the city that clings to the mountain like a crystal outcrop of rock, like an artery in the arch of a throat. The Lord of Salon sweeps the valley clean like a dust storm when it seems convenient to him to do so. But whether he deigns to leave his many-towered perch or holds it fast hardly matters. The crystal, in all its facets, has patience. It has seen more people, whether valorous and born or come down from one star or another, pass through this valley than can be remembered by human means. The riches that the off-worlders desire are partly the crystal itself, and partly the ore that gives rise to the crystal. The material they call desmerite, which bends gravity, forms the heart of their star drives, sends their ships far across the galaxy in an endless hunger for expansion. The crystal has at times offered up its veins, palest blue and smoky gray, to the hunger of the off-world miners' picks and drills, given itself up in fractal form to their desires. Yes, you may have my ore. You may have a tiny part of it, and with it I am with you, until the end of your own worlds. With it I am in you, and with you, and you will never ever be quite alone again, even though you may use me to bend gravity and shape the galaxy. A crystal voice in the mind of every off-worlder, and every Valorosan too, like a faint vision of the wind's howl in the dark season storms, a voice in their blood, in their lungs, in the teeming viscid jelly of their bone marrow, because those who stay here breathe the dust of it, and that dust is a million tiny voices in the dark. They wear dust masks in the worst of the storms, but even in the quiet lull they swallow it with every bite of food, every drink of water. Inside their bodies, every tiny crystal turns the same way to face the sun, would flare bright gold at dawn and sunset if the light could reach it. It watches, and if it is amused by the presumption of the off-worlders, perhaps that is why the song of the crystal as it flares in the evening sounds like distant laughter.
Chapter 1. And I have just managed to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the document. Hang on one moment.
We're
There
using
we
an
go.
iPad.
All right, here we go. Chapter 1. The single bright gleam of metal was crystal flare bright in the thick dust that coated the abandoned plastic shacks, the discarded tools and tarps, until Carrion picked it up. In his hand, the glow went to nothing. He was holding a twisted bit of aluminum, torn off of some piece of off-worlder equipment and left to glitter, a ghost reflection of dead industry. Carrion flipped it over his knuckles like he would a coin, making it flash again, back and forth, and then tossed away. It fell in an arc and came to rest, quiescent, against the pockmarked plastic wall of the building that might have been where the people from Colony City had kept their mining carts. There was nothing there now but desert-eaten dross, dust and wind and cast-away pieces of lives. As if the off-worlders cared for nothing beyond what they could pull out of the earth, and having been driven away from the scar that pulling had made, couldn't be troubled to scour the ground clean again. Carrion Citadel Tsarhan overlooked the cupped hand of this valley. It was the hand of an old man, deep-lined and dry, gone to arthritic knuckle and rough-chapped palm, but still cupped as if to hold out water or crystal, a hand that could offer if it wanted. In the spring, the valley flooded with snowmelt washed itself green, sang with insects and birdsong, grew grass hip-high, even on a man as tall as Carrion. In the spring, before the off-worlders had come, Carrion and his people had brought their horses and their sheep down the mountain to graze that grassland clear. Clear, save for the center of the valley, the deep heart of it. The valley below Tsarhan was a hand with a jagged hole in the meat of it, a dark place that pulled instead of giving. The Desmerite mine had been there when Carrion took Tsarhan and made it his own city. It had been there for a long time, long enough to have become a healed-over scar. Some generations ago, misadventure, quickly learned from. There was too much desmerite in the center of the valley. Horses and people would break their legs, wreck their lungs, straining against the weight of it. Mines would fall down, pulled inward, crush the men and women who worked beneath the earth. Better to leave the heart of the valley untouched, quiescent, undisturbed. Better to look for desmerite on the mountain, in the high places, where it grew not in dull veins of ore, but in embedded sprays of crystal. If there was desmerite crystal down in the earth where the off-worlders had clawed the mine open, blue glitter waiting in that endless darkness for its chance to sing at dawn, it would have been crushed to silence by the mine machines. It troubled Carrion to think of those strangled voices, how they might twist and call out poison instead of dawn song. It troubled him enough that he had made himself a nuisance of a king each time the Imperium sent yet another set of men and machines into the valley, demanding mining rights. The Imperium wanted the ore, wanted it enough to throw off-worlder bodies against the pull of gravity and let them shatter. The black eye of the mine gaped open, a maw, a torn wound that watched. Carts and carts of rough desmerite ore came out of it when the off-worlder Imperials had their little camps for a season. Machines and men clawing at the dry earth. But the wind and the summer dust that came after the richness of spring, the snow and killing cold of Valerosan winter that followed them in turn, and a few carefully designed personal intransiences on Carrion's own part, when necessary, drove the Imperials off again. 2 weeks ago, the latest group of them had retreated from their encampment for good. That was long enough for Carrion to have become curious as to what they had abandoned this time, curious and concerned. The way they mined left piles of slag human-high, twisted spoil heaps of ruined stone that once had shrouded the desmerite ore before the off-worlder chemicals dissolved it out. The Imperials were relatively scrupulous about their acids and their alkalines, at least in their unused forms. Carrion and his people had found them useful the few times they had found any remaining behind, but they left the waste product, the dissolved flesh of the valley, to simply sit. And even if in high summer the valley was cruel and dust drowned in heat, there would be winter snow and spring thaw after. All of that waste material washed into the spring-swollen river if the heaps were left too close to its banks. Carrion was no geologist. He had no idea what was actually in the spoil heaps. He did not think he needed to know. Carrion was a king, a land-sworn king, and this was his territory. Letting the river be poisoned by Imperial leavings would be poisoning himself. If he had to, he'd bring a whole group of riders down here to shift the waste piles to safer, higher ground. But this current expedition was a fact-finding sortie, an investigation, and so Carrion had brought only one companion. The youngest of his riders, Terach, the best shot, save perhaps for Carrion himself, with either rifle or pilfered Imperial light gun. The best shot, and also obedient to a fault, full eager to follow Carrion anywhere he might lead him. Carrion wasn't sure he'd ever been that young, and he'd been Terach's age relatively recently. They didn't bring their horses with them. High summer was no time to be so unkind to horses. Instead, they walked while the heat in the valley expanded to hold them, that cupped hand squeezing, a wavering mirage memory of a lake long gone to dust and boiling. Sometimes the land remembered itself, so close that Carrion could see another Valeros behind his closed eyelids. More and more, when he walked into the valley, Valeros remembered itself unmarred, waiting, chill. Water in the desert, like a dream made crueler by its distance from actuality. But he and Terach both knew how to breathe with the valley for a little while. They dressed for it, fine gauze robes, finer gauze scarves, only their eyes visible, sandals on their feet. Carrion was used to the grind of the dried soil under his soles. Wrapped hidden around his throat was a water skin and a damper cloth. Every so often he could spare a mouthful of water to produce some evaporative cooling. They carried rifles slung across their backs, the long-barreled kind, machines for rapid death, if necessary. When they'd entered the remains of the encampment, not quite a ruin, not sufficient for a ruin, Carrion had immediately been aware of the sharper pull of desmerite from the mine, the open black eye of it, a drowning pool, a cenote of dust. All of his directions were askew. North was the mine, and south was the mine, and east and west. There was only toward the deposit and away. Terach had never seen one of the abandoned encampments before. He followed the arc of the piece of metal Carrion had thrown, automatic hunter's tracking of movement, and then pushed his scarf down to ask, "Are they always like this? Plastic houses, plastic everything." Carrion wondered if he'd spotted the slight curve in that arc, the shift in the mind's gravity that made in the parabola of falling. "Usually," he said. "The plastic is all in kits. It locks together. If they'd stayed longer, they'd replace the balls that got too thin. Look, see, there, that one." He pointed, straight-armed, at the largest remaining structure. It was less a hut and more a shed, and one of its plastic prefabricated walls looked months newer than the others, even though it fit together seamlessly with them. This was how the Offworlders left no ruins, left nothing that could gather enough place to become a ruin. They reformed, replaced one wall with an identical wall, one group of miners with an identical group of miners, the next season around. "What's in that one?" Terach asked. "The shed thing." "Acids," said Carrion. "Acids and reagents, and, if we're lucky, if they left any that are still sealed. That's where they processed the ore before they took it back to their settlement. And we'll take those." "Fair salvage," Carrion said, and gave Terach a sharp grin, visible even under his dust scarf. "Anything useful is ours, and the rest is dross. We'll search the processing facility and then look at what they've done with the slag heaps this time. That's what matters, Terach, what they leave behind once they pull their claws out of the ground." He nodded, and when Carrion went into the dim, harsh-smelling shadow of the processing facility, Terach was right behind him, eyes wide, tugging his scarf up again over his mouth. Inside the building was oven hot, and the walls rattled in the rising wind. There was very little left of what had been here. Empty carts, the traces of chemicals in the air, the sort that burned a throat raw, dust and pieces of yellow-brown crystal, not desmorite, some byproduct of the miner's refining method, scattered down the long table that must have held the processing vats. He gestured for Terach to go left, and he went right, walking deeper into the darkness, seeking anything that would be worth carrying back on the long trip up the mountain. He'd like to find more light gun chargers, though he doubted he would. That had only been the once 2 years ago. And the Imperials took more time in their leaving now, were more careful to remove anything that they knew to be useful. It was far more likely they'd find water filters, or find machined pieces of metal that could be repurposed, or the acids he'd promised Terach, chemicals that his people would be hard-pressed to refine to easy off-worlder levels of purity. But what Carrion truly wanted was maps. Maps or documents, even the sort written on filmy plastic the off-worlders preferred. Information as to their plans. Information as to what had made the mine fail this time around. Searching in the heat was a brutality even after Carrion's eyes adjusted to the dimness. When he spotted the stack of white rounded containers, semi-transparent and still sealed shut, labeled in the off-worlder alphabet that he could read if he paid a great deal of attention, as sulfuric acid, the chemical they used to get desmorite out of its surrounding rock, he was relieved. Something, after all, to make this trip worth his time and Terach's. Something more than coming to see if this abandoned place was a true ruin yet, a permanent and haunted scar on the landscape, or if it was just piles of soulless plastic dwindling to nothing. Nothing save the pull of the mine, like a whisper in the dim. The next gust of wind was louder, the rattle of plastic a hot, smothering shudder. Carrion shut his eyes and imagined the valley full of palest dawn-blue water. The shore of the lake that might once have covered the plain beyond it, where the off-worlder town they called Colony City was dug in. Imagined the clarity of that crystal blue, and the black wink of desmorite in the heart of it, and felt the whole encampment, all these unnecessary buildings, shimmer under his feet. All the particles of desmorite remembering some other time, some other Valoros, destabilized, not quite real, not quite here. The off-worlders never yet had understood what they were doing, digging in the earth, where only crystal could hear them if they were crushed. He lashed the acid containers together with a leather strap, slung them over his left shoulder to keep his rifle holster clear, and kept searching. There was very little else of interest. A half-used box of dust filter masks, none of which would do the job of a tight woven Valorosan scarf, a cache of graphite pencils, which Carrion slipped inside his sash. When he came around again to the processing hut's door, Terach was waiting for him empty-handed. "Nothing?" Carrion asked him neutrally, trusting his judgment. It was his first time out of the Citadel on a ride with his lord. even if there hadn't been writing involved. He could use the encouragement. Terach shrugged. There's a break room with some old dehydrated food and some off-worlder entertainment, I guess. Books and things, but plastic. Books, Carrie-Anne said, tasting the word. What kind of books? I don't know, said Terach. They're in off-worlder language. Bad ones, probably. The covers are, do you want to see? Show me, said Carrie-Anne, and Terach did. The break room was small, hardly more than a table and a few plastic chairs. Plastic but squishy, as if the Imperium had understood that people enjoyed being comfortable while resting from work, but not at all how to manage such a thing. The books Terach found were in a lattice-sided crate. They were plastic too, the thin kind that felt slippery under fingertips and took ink and color. If you knew how to impregnate the page, that was, a process Carrie-Anne could only imagine, not reproduce. But he didn't need to reproduce these. They were treasure enough as they were. He picked up the nearest one. It was not plans or maps or documents that would reveal off-worlder designs and politics. It had a lurid picture on the cover, a hologram, but one which had come askew as the book disintegrated. It showed two women in what Carrie-Anne assumed were either spacesuits or simply imperial fashion, floating as if they were underwater. One of them had clearly just stabbed the other with what appeared to be a letter opener, or else a very small sword, or would have appeared to have stabbed her, considering the lurid red blood on her chest, if the hologram had still been working. As it was, it seemed as if the assailant had committed murder asymptotically. It was titled, More Delicate Chill, an Invigilator Julila Gataki case, and there were 5 more just like it in the crate. Carrie-Anne smiled. These are useful? Terach asked him. These, said Carrie-Anne, are precious. These are literature, Terach, and bad literature, with simple sentences and all sorts of new words I don't know yet in them. Terach did not look convinced. He looked like he was trying to look convinced for Carrie-Anne's sake. It's easier, Carrie-Anne explained, to learn Imperial from books than from actual Imperials, who are all sorts of trouble and don't teach you nearly enough colloquial terms while you are discussing mining rights with them and how they should get out of your valley. But you said they were bad. They are, which means they'll have the most useful vocabulary, except for technical manuals or scientific textbooks, and I've only managed to get those once. Well done, Terach. This is a prize. Terach gathered the books up, tied them together, and shoved them into his pack. Do you think you're going to have to talk to them again, my lord? The off-worlders. This is a very abandoned mining camp. Maybe they're finished. Carrie-Anne shook his head. Off-worlders and Desmerite are never finished. Did you see the opening to the mine when we were coming in? Like an eye, said Terach, and shivered, visibly, even under all of his drapery. An open eye. All that ore waiting for them. They'll be back in the fall, or sooner, whenever they've decided that this failure was the fault of one person, or a bad season, or some other excuse. And you'll drive them away again. Carrie-Anne shrugged, smiled under the scrim of his scarf. They deeply dislike me. That is true. It made Terach laugh, which was better than having him be thinking of the depths of the mine, the pull, the way the off-worlders had ravaged this place again, the piles of slag and waste they would have to inspect and shift and keep track of. Carrie-Anne had made a point of cultivating imperial dislike. If they wanted to open up the heart of his valley, so he also had wants. Demands, chemicals and light guns and surveyors' maps and stacks of their plastic writing paper, which is useful for 1,000 things other than writing. Recognition in perpetuity of his territorial claim to the citadel, the mountain, all its passes, which meant nothing to off-worlders, but perhaps something to the other Valarosans who knew this valley, the riches of the mountain, the fame of Serhan and its towers. Carrie-Anne was young in his power. He knew it. If the off-worlders would treat only with him and not with any other Valarosan king, well, it was a poison advantage, but an advantage. But you will drive them off, Terach repeated, like a child asking for reassurance. He had been a child recently enough. Carrie-Anne could be kind when he had the space to be. I will be a thorn and a draw light, he said, when they come back again to the mine. When they come back again to see how quickly Valaros undoes all their work, I'll be waiting for them then. And he squared his shoulders, adjusted the hang of the chemical bottles at his side, and led Tarak out to look at whether or not the off-worlders had left their leach heaps far enough from the riverbank. Behind them, the empty hut rattled and creaked in the wind, sand and pebbles spick-spacking against the plastic walls as the planet got on with wearing it away.
Colony City, the largest imperial outpost on the surface of Valeros, had not been home to Audax Cray so much as a place to store himself. It was a town built hurriedly out of prefab modular plastic segments, dull green and immediately sand-scoured with the endless wind of the plains. It was identical to any other imperial settlement on a hinterland planet in its soulless anonymity. It had not been home, but it had been a place of greater safety than the inimical world outside. Now, leaving it for what was almost certainly the last time, he felt a twinge of nostalgia for the familiar setting he'd inhabited for 2 years. The little convoy of ground crawlers he was traveling with stretched ahead of him toward the jagged mountains in the east, almost obscured by the silver scrim of mirage cast by the Valerosan sun. He had known, of course, that he was being sent out to die, to let the planet eat him, after all. Governor Sarks had not said so when she ordered him to go. She had not needed to. The triumphant smile had been enough. That and the words she'd used. Who better than Captain Cray, our best and brightest geological engineer, to oversee the most significant desmerite mining operation yet undertaken on Valeros, and to conduct negotiations for expanded rights, a great honor, and one so richly deserved. Like most effective pretext, it was technically true. Cray was the best they had, the logical choice to take over the problematic Sathan Valley workings. The Sathan Valley had the richest desmerite ore deposits the Imperium had surveyed so far. It also held the local arrogant princeling with whom those extended mining rights had to be negotiated, a princeling who had already driven off several previous expeditions, or at least strongly encouraged them to leave. Cray was the best qualified, but also the least suited person on Valeros to the conditions of the Sathan site. Seen on a gravimetric projection, the mass concentration of the desmerite loads under the surface of the valley was a dark blotch of intensity, with G readings topping 3 and spiking into 5 at the richest outcrops. And Cray wondered, watching that shimmering silver mirage obscuring the convoy ahead of him, how long it would take to break him beyond repair, how long he could stand it before he could no longer stand. He would not be the first engineer to be shattered by the Sathan workings. He would be the 12th. He'd been the one to discover and expose the deep-down grift in the government of Colony City, grift that had been going on practically since the imperial mining operation was set up. He'd been waiting to find himself exterminated in some convenient to Governor Sark's manner ever since. It was only a matter of time. It was faintly ironic that his genetics were the reason Lucilla Sarks and the rest of the council could not simply have had him neatly disposed of, no matter how much they wanted to. Despite the fact that he was half FM, breakable, and even standard G, he was also the son of Callicrates Cray, a man high up enough in the central imperial bureaucracy to be the sort of enemy one did not wish to make, even this far out from the core worlds. Better far to send Cray out to the wilderness and let the planet do the job for them. Better and cleaner, maintaining plausible deniability. Cray sat back in the ground crawler seat and looked back at the city. From a distance, it looked almost pretty, the green plastic buildings bright in the sun. He could remember landing 2 years ago and thinking that he might not hate everything as much as he'd anticipated, and finding out quite quickly that he was wrong. That first night he had spent on Valeros, he had not slept at all, concentrating rather on the work of breathing, making his ribs expand while the planet's relentless pull wanted them to collapse. The whole body ache, the sensation of all his bones being cored with lead, the dizziness as the non-return valves in his blood vessels fought against forces they were not designed to encounter, the rapid heartbeat as his body tried to get blood to his brain against that inexorable downward force. All of it Cray had been expecting, and in fact all of it was just about as terrible as he'd imagined it would be. It took him a week to get used to it, and another before he stopped noticing how much he hurt. He'd thrown himself into the work. That had helped. The first year he'd been assigned to conduct aerial gravimetric surveys and compile data into a comprehensive geological survey map of the continent. And this he had done with a kind of narrow-focused intensity that had worried his instructors in the academy on Solace. The job had been both challenging and interesting, and it had taken up enough of Cray's runtime that he had not noticed the nagging little discrepancies in the accounts of how much desmerite ore was being mined and how much desmerite ore was officially being transferred up to the Admiral Priam each month for shipment back to the Imperium. Had not noticed for almost 2 years, by which time, he had calculated, sick with shock staring at the screens, Enough desmerite had gone missing to buy the preem itself several times over. Once the scheme was detected, it was almost embarrassingly easy to trace it through the records. It had been going on for half a decade, and either no one else had noticed or everyone had noticed and decided not to care, possibly in return for a small share of the profits. Half the city council was in on it, as were the chiefs of law enforcement and justice. The ore was mined, processed, and packed for shipment just as usual, but for each month the number of crates on the shipping manifest and the number of crates in the actual shipment differed slightly. Once on board the preem, the extra desmerite had found its way somewhere other than the Imperium's central facility, into an incredibly lucrative black market. Cray had done the math and worked out how much backbreaking, filthy, dangerous work the miners had done over those years for no purpose than to enrich a group of already wealthy and influential individuals, and come up with a very clear answer indeed, and had known with a leaden kind of certainty that the price for that answer would be enormous. He had looked at the medical records for the various mines, seen the fractures, the falls, the crushing injuries, the deaths, the cases of crystal lung, had looked at his own fingers crooked slightly from so many breaks, imagined how it must be to work in a desmerite mine, surrounded by that awful dragging weight. The price of truth would be enormous, but it also needed to be paid. And the ground crawler, he closed his eyes, remembering then Counselor Lucilla Sarks sitting in her office staring at him, with the lights of the city outside her window. Even now, even on his way to what would almost certainly be his death, Cray had to smile a little at the neatness with which he'd done it. She had been running for governor in a close race with 2 other candidates, and the election was coming up fast. It was with this in mind that a shocked, anxious Captain Cray had come to see her with the terrible discovery of corruption amongst the city's leaders, conveniently leaving her out of the list, which she certainly belonged on, to ask her advice on how he should break the news to the public. Not if, but how. He'd seen the wheels start to turn once her initial shock had worn off, seen her come to the conclusion he had meant her to about as quickly as he had expected it. If she, Councillor Sarks, candidate for the governor's office, were the one to lay bare this dreadful secret to the city, if she were seen to be the upstanding moral citizen who could not allow this to continue, exploiting the hard work of the miners and laboratory personnel who processed the ore, she'd have the election in the palm of her hand, while remaining safe from suspicion herself. And if Cray were to accuse her of being involved after the fact, what possible reason would she have had to break the situation wide open? He would look like an idiot with an agenda, and he was only a captain in any case, scarcely anyone who mattered. And he had known, looking into her eyes, that he was going to die. If not right then, the method. Cray looked ahead again, into the mirage and the mountains beyond it, and thought, I'd better be getting on with it, hadn't I?
And that's about halfway through chapter 1. And we did want to leave some time for questions, so that's where we're going to stop for now. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you as well. I'm just going to pop in real quick. That was awesome. That made me really happy. That was such an awesome reading. Thank you both. For the folks in the chat, Sarah is now going to talk with Arkady and Viv and do some Q&A. And just a quick note, there was a bit of disruption in YouTube about halfway through the reading. Some of our folks who were in the chat were kicked off, but we got them back on, and the reading itself has been recorded. So if you missed part of the reading in the middle, this is being recorded for posterity and will be on the Erewhon Books YouTube after this is concluded. So if you got a question, please put it in the chat. Arkady and Vivian, thank you again very much. And I'm going to remove myself from the stream. Pah!
Hi.
Hi.
So, there are a number of questions for both of you. Let's start with, you know what, let's just go in order because that's easier. I was going to curate and I was just like, I'm scrolling on a tiny bar here. So this one is for Arkady. So Watts06071 writes, I finished Memory a few days ago and loved it. I was wondering whether you had personal experiences similar to Mahit, apart from the crazy stuff, of course, lol.
As far as I know, I have never had anyone else's memory inside my head. But the answer is both yes and no. I am not from a colonized culture. I'm an American Jew. I grew up in New York City. So I don't share that with Mahit. I do share some of the sense of being assimilated, but only conditionally, never quite entirely American, that exist in sort of by nature of being a white Jewish person, white until someone decides otherwise. And so that was part of the impetus. But to build Mahit's culture, I got a lot of really good advice from friends and colleagues who are from cultures which are more colonized rather than assimilated. But I think what is really personal about Mahit for me is that hideous longing for something you wish you didn't want. I feel that way about, I built Texcalan as like a trap for myself. I made the empire I'd fall in love with. And I meant it to be that pretty, and I meant it to be that awful, because that tension is something I experience in real life.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So this one's for Vivian. It's from Anthony Zerpoli. One of the main themes of the Greta books is self-forgiveness, which is then related to a sense of religious experience with Varney in the final book. What inspired this theme and development?
Basically, everything that's in those books is a compilation of things I want to have existed and things I'm afraid will exist. And the idea of like forgiveness being a thing that you can give yourself is something I definitely want to exist, whether or not it does. And I am not religious in any way. I'm not Christian. I'm not anything. So my approach to that was, I hope I didn't do it wrong. And the idea of it being a monster who prayed that would cause the end times to stop being end times, that would catch God's attention. That's the kind of thing that I wish would actually happen.
What a thing to wish for. So let's see. This one is for Arkady. It's from Watts06071. My mother language has quite a few similarities with Texcalani in the sense that poetry is very prominent in it. Did you have any earthly language in your mind?
Texcalanli is based off of most closely classical Nahuatl, which is the language that was spoken by the Mexica, the Aztec Empire. And it's certainly not classical Nahuatl. I had a dictionary and some really basic grammatical knowledge, and then I messed with it because I didn't want it to be any one language. For the sense of poetry, I'm actually working a lot off of medieval Greek and medieval Arabic, and also various versions of Mandarin, Chinese, both medieval, pre-medieval, modern. Poetry and language are not nearly as like passé as I think sometimes American Anglophones think they are, though any American Anglophone who listens to rap is disabused of this notion pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So basically for me, I love languages. I love playing with them. And having a language that was hyper-poetic and capable of encoded messaging in its poetry was something that I really wanted to work on.
I'm very curious about any particular Mandarin poets you might have an affinity for.
I did an AMA yesterday on Reddit. No, Tuesday, because time is a flat circle. And I mentioned there an anonymous poet who is a Buddhist monk who goes by the epithet of Shishu, which I'm pronouncing wrong, and wrote paired haiku. I know there's an actual name for the two in a row paired haiku. And I absolutely love that poetry. It's a little bit angry, it's very political, and it is also about removing oneself and watching from afar. And I got a lot of inspiration from that.
Thank you for indulging me.
Of course.
Let's see. The next question is for both of you. It's from Lee Foreign, I guess. This joint project is as amazing as it sounded in theory, a smorgasbord of your passions and interests. When might us lesser mortals get to read this?
Fingers crossed about 2-3 years with how slow publishing goes.
Also, we haven't finished writing it. We're about a quarter of the way through. So, I mean,
yeah,
you got to wait on us to finish writing it. Then we have to sell it.
And then it has to like go through the process. So cross your fingers for 2023, 2024.
Hopefully.
Well, at least hopefully the pandemic will be over by then.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Let's see. This one is from Anthony Zerpoli for both of you, or no, for Arkady. Memory explores the relationship between language and colonial empire, and I was wondering if there was any particular linguistic theory or reading that you drew on for this.
This is one of those questions where I need a 2-page bibliography, and the short answer is I kind of did a postdoc on this about the ways in which medieval historiography used narrative to preserve different forms of cultural memory about the same event. So I can answer this question, but badly aloud without the stack of books next to me. But if you'd like a bibliography, I can throw it up on my newsletter at some point, just stuff that inspired me. A whole lot of narratology went into this.
I'm sure we'll all be looking out for that newsletter. So this is a question from Aaron Larson for both of you. Any particular genres or types of stories you'd like to explore in your future works?
You go first.
Well, I am really looking forward to this project being completed and out there, because I would love to be a space opera writer as opposed to just someone who does urban fantasy. There's nothing wrong with urban fantasy, but I desperately want some of that space opera cred. I also want to possibly try cozy mysteries, because I think I'd be kind of good at them. I've spent a lot of my life reading Ngaio Marsh and Agatha Christie. So
I'm trying out police procedural and cyberpunk. So we'll see how that works. And my editor at Tor gave me a faintly terrifying, you should do a fantasy, and then stared at me because that's Davey. And I don't know what that would involve, but maybe it's this. Maybe this is the thing she wants.
Close to fantasy.
I mean, what I'm hearing is from Arkady, a cyberpunk police procedural in a fantasy world, and what I'm hearing from Vivian is a locked room murder mystery in outer space.
Yeah, that's kind of what Hard Bargains
That
is
is Hard Bargains.
I have a space opera that I'm sort of working on and off, and it's set on a space station out at the back of Beyond, and it's basically a murder mystery. So yeah, you're right.
Okay, so this is a question from Nadia Elbar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and it's for both of you. Both of you have substantial experience and expertise in sciences, geology, chemistry, etc.
No, only her.
I was wondering if you have a favorite scientific instrument or metrology tool, and if so, what?
Well, neither of us has any actual official science background. Both of my degrees are in the humanities, but I was raised by wild scientists, and so I kind of sucked it in by osmosis. I mean, diffusion, not osmosis. But I would say favorite scientific instrument. The scanning electron microscope is really cool, but I would say the cross-linking plastics nuclear irradiator. I want one.
It won't fit in the house.
I know. It's really big.
Yeah, we'd have to have a bigger house.
Yes, but I really want an irradiator.
Okay. I can maybe get you an autoclave. Not
The same.
I know.
Explain to the audience what these things are. They sound cool.
An autoclave is just something that sanitizes stuff by exposing it to ultraviolet radiation.
Nope.
No,
Pressure
am I wrong?
cooker.
Pressure cooker. It's a pressure
Autoclave is a
cooker.
giant pressure cooker.
We have one.
Yes, I know.
Oh, okay. You explain the shiny things.
Right. Well, the scanning electron microscope, I have no idea how it works. But what it does is it takes unbelievably teensy-weensy photos of stuff that you could absolutely not imagine seeing with an optical microscope in any way. Like we're looking at nanotubes, that kind of thing. And the cross-linking nuclear irradiator is actually a linear accelerator. It produces a very strong beam of ionizing radiation, which they use to do things to plastics and also to sterilize medical equipment and some food supplies.
Well, thank you. I think we have... Oh, no, there's one more that I just scrolled past. Jeremy asks, how are you two finding the process of collaboration?
We have way too much fun.
Yeah, we've been doing it our whole
relationship basically.
Yeah, that's how we met.
That's how we met. Is I wrote her fan mail. It is both easy and hard. Hard because I care about it this much, but easy in terms of working with Viv. We're actually very different writers, though we've managed to come up with a style that sounds pretty similar when we work on it together. But process-wise, we're very different. And we're getting quite much better at managing the ways in which we're different. But it helps that we both love this story, and we have always, and hopefully will always, love telling stories with each other and to each other.
And at each other.
So it's probably the easiest collaboration I've ever done.
I have never in my life had a writing experience so seamless and so remarkable as with you. I have written stories with a bunch of other people in my time. And a lot of the time it's been a struggle. And we've generally got a good product at the end of it, but it was definitely a struggle. And this is just, it's seamless. It's like, I tell you part of the story and then you tell me the next part.
We stand around in the kitchen plotting out the next bits.
I draw diagrams.
That's because I can't draw at all. It's funny how badly I cannot draw.
I am your spaceship consultant and your resident artist.
Yes.
I think this is all of the questions.
Well, thank you guys for asking them. They were really good questions.
Yeah.
And it is right about 8. Welcome back, Marty.
Ta-da. Yeah, I think... we have one last question from Watts for Arkady. Just a simple yes or no. Is 3 seagrass in the sequel?
Yes.
A lot.
There you go, Watts. That's for you. Thank you, Sarah, for asking questions. Thank you, Arkady and Viv, for doing this, for answering questions, for such an awesome reading. I'm a big fan of you as people and as writers. This was
Thank you.
And it's so good to see you guys. And I'm just going to do a quick little wrap up. If you are in the chat and have a link to the Erewhon Community Zoom Hangout, that's going to start in the next minute or two. Liz should have begun that, or will begin that in the next minute or so. So if you have the link to that and would like to join us, feel free. We'd love to see you and to catch up. If you're in the chat and don't have a link to that, please feel free to drop us a line on Twitter. You can also DM us or just email us at info@erewhonbooks.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, at Erewhon Books, E-R-E-W-H-O-N, books.com. And we'll send you that link right away. That'll go until about 9:30 until folks get sick of each other. But final plug, follow us on, hit like and subscribe. I feel like I'm an influencer now.
Subscribe.
Subscribe, like and subscribe. Please follow these wonderful authors online. Cerulean Cynic, and just Arkady
I'm
Martine.
easy. It's just Arkady Martine.
Arkady Martine on Twitter. Sarah Guan's on Twitter at Sarah Guan, right? Just at Sarah Guan?
Sarah_Guan.
Sarah_Guan. And I'm on Twitter at McFlyCahill90. Don't worry about the Back to the Future reference. We as a company are there at Erewhon Books. You can find us at Facebook, Twitter, here at YouTube, Instagram. And we are an independent sci-fi fantasy publisher. We have our first book out, The Fortress by S.A. Jones, with many more to come this coming fall. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Arkady and Viv. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. This was so much fun.
I know.
Yeah.
We got to do this again.
We do have to do it again.
We will. We'll make it happen. This is great. All right. Well, I'm going to log you guys off. I'll log off myself. We'll end the broadcast. Everyone will give a nice wave. And remember, if you didn't see the middle of the reading, in a few minutes, this will all be uploaded to YouTube. We'll put it out on our socials, and you can see it again. It's great. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Have a wonderful night. See you in the Zoom chat. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Stay safe. Stay healthy. We'll see you out there, and keep reading and take care of each other. All right.